Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bald Explorer Live. It's Friday the 4th, beg your pardon, Friday the 24th of July 2020. And I'm back here again to do another reading. Hope you're all well wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in. Hello to Turbo Stream, to the lovely Julia, to Cynthia Pate, to Audrey Forbes Hamilton. It's very nice of you to join me for another reading, the last of this week. We're getting close to the end. Yes, very exciting, of this particular book. And we have another one lined up. But actually, I bought another couple of books by H.J. Massingham, who seemed to write, another prolific writer. I just thought I'd share these with you whilst we're waiting for people to come along. The first one is called The Englishman's Year. The Englishman's Year. It's a nice old book, isn't it? This is, I think, written in the 40s, 48 or something like that. And I believe it's written between, well, I can't remember now, September and September, I think, or something like that. And interestingly, there's a little bit here. This is written in 1948 or 47, and he's talking about, he's in Kent, and he's talking about his observations in Kent. And I just read this little bit earlier today. I just want to see if I can find it. So he says he's it's even a traveller, little bitten by Corbett's itch to spy out the productiveness of the land, could hardly fail to remark that Kent is still a county of mixed farming. Its cornucopia is hardly less visible today than when Fuller, Drayton, Reginald Scott and others praised it 3 centuries ago. How, the traveller wonders, is Kent able to maintain this tradition in face of the massive modern pressure towards monoculture, specialisation, and the throwing of small farms into big? And it's interesting because he makes that observation in another book called The Wisdom of the Fields, in which he sort of warns about this new method of farming, which is turning small mixed farms, traditional farms, into monoculture. And I was only making a video about that the other day. 80 years on, we're absolutely in it. The Face of Britain had a series, and this one's called, the same author, English Downland. And it's not just the South Downs, but it's got the Chilterns, the Wiltshire Downs, the Sussex, and a little bit of the North Surrey Downs, with some lovely old black and white photographs and all of that. And it's, again, he's travelling around the countryside, making observations. There's a fascinating insight into life in the 40s, which I am particularly fascinated with myself, as you can tell from the books that we're reading. So there we are. Can they see what I'm wearing, says Audrey. I'm not sure. Audrey says, when our hero was in Wigan the other day, I mentioned Northern Soul in a comment. Today YouTube is recommending videos about Northern Soul. What, I can't remember what Northern Soul is. I've never been to Kent either, says Turbo Stream. Good afternoon to Lee Lawson, to Morton Lewis, to John Willoughby, to Les Jarvis, even Todd Desborough, and others. Cheers from the Bald Explorer mug. So there we go. Right, so we are, how far are we in? Well, now looking at this, I reckon we are about 5/6. It's quite precise, isn't it? 5/6 through. Right, okay, so this is chapter 11, in which the land of the Norfolk folk, and I enter Norwich, prowl the sad sea marbles and walk along a dead road, describe the Isle of Ely and the men who chip flint. So if that's not gripping, I don't know what is. I was lost in a Norfolk lane, so I stopped a man and I said to him, "Good morning." He looked at me. "Good morning," I cried. "Can you tell me if I am right for Norwich?" He continued to look at me. Then, in an uneasy, suspicious way, he said, "Why do you want to know for?" In a West Country accent, which I can't do a Norfolk accent, so in respect of that, I'm giving you West Country, but please ignore that it's West Country. Supplement Bernard Matthews for my booming lovely. I don't know how even Bernard Matthews used to talk. I might have been annoyed, but leaning out of the car and putting on an affable expression which I usually keep up at tea parties, I continued, "My dear boy, I just want to know because I want to get to Norwich." The ghost of a smile flitted over his rustic face, and he replied, after some deep thought, rather reluctantly, and looking away from me, said, "Well, you're right." I don't expect anyone to believe this unless he knows Norfolk. Norfolk is the most suspicious county in England. In Devon and Somerset, men hit you on the back cordially. In Norfolk, they look as though they would hit you over the head till they've sized you up. You see, for centuries, the Norfolk of East Anglia were accustomed to meet stray Vikings on lonely roads who had just waded ashore from the long boats. "Good morning, boar," said the Vikings. "Which is the way to the church?" "What do you want to know for?" was the Norfolk retort. "Well, we thought about setting fire to it." You will gather that Norfolk's suspicion of strangers, which is an ancient complex bitten into the East Anglian through the centuries of bitter experience, is well grounded and should never annoy the traveller. They mean well. Once they bring themselves to call you bore, I'm not sure if that's supposed to be neighbour, which I conclude is the short for neighbour or perhaps boy, you can consider yourself highly complimented. In East Anglia, men are either neighbours or Vikings. If they promote you to boredom, they will do any mortal thing for you, except perhaps lend you money, for one Norfolk's farmer could beat any 3 Yorkshiremen at driving a bargain. The word bore is the most popular one in Norfolk dialect, except perhaps morther, which means girl. Norfolk is full of sturdy, good-looking morthers with magnificent necks and arms. Some wear flaxen hair in plaits around their ears and look like young Brunhildles, reminding you, I have no idea what a Brunhildle is, reminding you that sometimes the Vikings settled down in Norfolk. Boadicea was a typical Norfolk morther before she took up politics. I went on between hedges through a country mellow with harvest. Is there a more magnificent sight in England than a large field of wheat ripe for reaping? Such rich gold, such tall, majestic stalks like legions of gold arrows. I love the way you can trace the dips and falls of a field on the top of the tall wheat. I love also the little stray winds that dust the corn stalks in small gusts, blowing them aside and passing on. The churches of Norfolk are unique. The art of using flint for building here developed as I have seen it in another county. Developed as I have seen it in no other county. Hundreds of thousands of flints, a few inches square, are embedded into the mortar, forming a polished grey hard wall, as hard as steel and indestructible. The effect is most unusual, And if you have ever tried to chip flint, which is the most difficult, unreasonable, capricious stone in the world, you look at these churches with added reverence. I must tell you that it was in these lanes that I met my first pig. I have encountered the cows in every county of England, from Somerset to Cumberland, but this was, I must say, my first pig. She seemed, as I turned the corner rather quickly and headed right for her, to be reading her fortune in the middle of the road. She was a big shrimp-coloured prima donna with bloodshot eyes, and she wore her tail in a small, neat knot. Awakened to the realities by my swift arrival, for I had to jam on the brakes hard, she did a little leap and came running towards me under the impression, apparently, that she was going in the opposite direction. That is where I misread her. She had a strong home instinct, and she knew that she had to get past me. She gave this up, shook a couple of bath chaps at me, and uttering a series of shrill feminine squeals, ran right ahead, calling on all her gods. As I observed her short, inadequate legs carrying all this bacon down the lane, I knew that in her disturbed mind she believed that she was doing about 50 miles an hour. I tried kindly to edge past her, but she advanced a ham at an inappropriate moment and recoiled in horror from the bonnet. A ton of bacon in a narrow lane can be more stupid than a hen which belongs to the local suicide club. I hate to frighten animals, so I stopped and dismounted, full of good intentions, with the idea of driving her back past the car. However, uttering reproaches in a most unreasonable manner, she dived into a hedge where, serve her right, she stuck fast. How about that? All that bacon waddling down the road. How lovely is that? I was sitting at a gate studying a map of Norfolk when there came towards me the first tramps I've ever seen, or rather the first obvious tramps that I've seen since Cheshire. The man was pushing a wooden box on a perambulator wheel, and the woman was walking a few paces behind him, carrying a cardboard tray and wearing the remains of a once fashionable long-waisted tailor-made costume. She came up to me, pulling the collar of the costume to her throat, which made me realise that she had nothing on beneath it, and asked me to buy a packet of lavender. Much to her surprise, I bought 12. The man was surprised. So was the mongrel pup, who had one sharp ear cocked on the hedge and the rabbity look about his jaw. So we all stood smiling in a group. "Well," I said, "it's an awful life, isn't it? But thank goodness. Catch, we have tobacco." "What?" "But thank goodness." "Oh, catch." He's obviously throwing it. "We have," it says, sorry. Because I haven't seen these lines before, I've no idea how to interpret them, and I'm making it up as I go along, and inevitably I'm going to get it wrong. "Well," I said, it's an awful life, isn't it? But thank goodness, catch, we've got tobacco." Not really the way forward these days, but there you go. Tramps sum you up quicker than a dog or a child. They decide in 1 second whether you're dangerous or harmless. So we got talking. "Steady job," said the woman. "Wouldn't be in a steady job long, Joe, would you?" Joe narrowed his eyes and looked down the road. He was born a tramp, a born walker, a born wanderer, half countryman, half townsman, quite young, but one of those people civilization never breaks in. He had served during the war. "Well," he said in a tired drawl, "well, you don't pay no rent, and you don't pay no rents, and no income tax, and you can get all you want to eat most times, and I like the country. I don't get on in towns." He told me that his people were well-to-do village folk somewhere who wanted him to settle down. He spat. I won't have no truck with them, he said. They can keep their blinking money. I don't want it. And you, I said to the woman, how do you like it? She smiled. She was also a vagrant, I think, a much rarer type in a woman, or she may just be slipshod and lazy. I've seen better days, she said, putting on a miserable face and drawing her coat collar up. Go on with you, I laughed. Admit it. Admit you'd hate to know where you sleep next week. How awful. What a horrible thing to say. Admit it that you hate to know where you'd sleep next week. She laughed. Perhaps I would, though it's cold sometimes and me stockings dry on me legs and give me rheumatism sometimes. It's cruel at times. I wonder how long either of you would stay in a house. Not long, said the man, definitely. Here, boy, come away there. He's a sharp dog, sir. I've been offered quids for him, but he's never caught a rabbit. It was at this untruthful moment a stoat ran across the road, and the dog was on it like a dart. We tactfully changed the subject. They told me far more than they realised. The fun is to tramp from town to town as members of this lazy, irresponsible brotherhood, meeting friends in doss houses every night, swapping news, hearing how old so-and-so did such and such a thing, putting out all the eatables onto the table and holding an auction, and then wandering on again, listless, without ambition, unenvious of other men, just drifters. He whistled the dog and nodded to me. She smiled and showed teeth, and they went off down the road. The man pushed the truck that held all his worldly goods, the woman a step or two behind, the mongrel questing ahead. You could not feel sorry for them. I believe they were happier than any millionaire, happier, in fact, than most of us. I struck the main road and made for Norwich. Can't really believe that as being true, but hey-ho. The most surprising thing about Norwich is that it contains the only Norman cathedral in England unknown to Americans. Norwich is not on the Pilgrim's map, and the reason is geographical. The tourist stream flows due south from Lincoln to Peterborough, Ely, Cambridge, leaving Norwich and the great eastward bulge of Norfolk 50 miles to the left. Someday, of course, the people who map tours will discover Norwich and the 14th century hotel, which has hot and cold water laid on to the bedroom. Someday, maybe. Norwich may even Norwich may even discover itself. Norwich is a confusing, characteristic city. It was excuse me, I've got something stuck in the throat. It was tied up into hasty knots centuries ago and never has been unwound. It is characteristic of Norfolk. It is a monument to the Norfolk folk, and it bears the marks of all their peculiarities. It has flint walls and is difficult to know at a glance. Norwich in Somerset would be unthinkable. It is an expression of sturdy East Anglia. I came here knowing nothing about the city except that it always made money, that it once was the third city in England, and when its weaving trade went north after the coalfields, Norfolk just put on a flinty face and learned how to make women's shoes. Trust Norwich to survive. I saw a red-roofed city dominated by two landmarks, a slim cathedral spire, second only to Salisbury, and a great square Norman castle on a hill, in the heart of which, so George Borrow said confidently, sits an old heathen king, with his sword in his hand and his gold and silver treasures about him. I went through queer medieval streets, many paved with cobblestones, all distinguished by a picturesque dowdiness. some Flemish in appearance, full of houses with big inverted V on the top story where the hand looms were housed. And at night, beside the river, I might have been in England or the Netherlands of the 14th century, with the moon falling on huddled roofs, lamplight moving in slow waters, the dark figures of men and women going through dark alleyways between the leaning eaves. Norwich has been called the city of churches. It struck me also as a city of public houses and canneries. 100 little homes, in 100 of little homes. The shoemakers of Norwich breed prize canaries. Oh, sorry, I say canneries. I meant canaries. In hundred of little... Do you mean in hundreds? In hundreds of little homes, the shoemakers of Norwich breed prize canaries and discuss points as keenly as Newmarket discusses horses. If you want to stop the traffic in Norwich, the quickest way would be to walk through the city with a first-class Norwich plain head on your finger. "Those are the boys that pay the rent," said a shoemaker's wife to me, nodding to a cage full of little gold birds. I saw a man who keeps in the season more than 5,000 canaries. He exports them to Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand. The ship's butcher used to belong to a livestock. Looks after the ship's... I'm reading very badly today, and I'm sorry about that. I was reading badly yesterday. I'm obviously having a bit of a reading badly thing. It must be something in the air at the moment. The ship's butcher, being used to livestock, looks after them on the voyage, he told me. I was offered a plain head cock for £5 and a crested hen for £4, but I managed to get away alone. There comes a time in the life of all old cities when the city fathers should inform a coalition government to decide whether their city is to preserve its ancient beauty or to become a second Leicester or a little Birmingham. Norwich, it seems to me, has reached this point. In 50 years' time, Norwich will either not be worth looking at, or it will be one of the most beautiful old cities in England. Few cities possesses so many complete streets of half-timbered houses, some medieval, some Tudor. Most are distinguished by ugly Georgian plaster. Few cities possesses so many complete streets of half-timbered houses, some medieval, some Tudor. Most are disguised by ugly Georgian plaster, which, if scraped off, would reveal the old red brick and oak. Under intelligent treatment, Norwich would emerge like a restored oil painting. The local authorities should spend a weekend in Shrewsbury in order to realise the remarkable chance that lies immediately before them. Then, on their return, they might catch the architects responsible for putting up new banks like Georgian cinemas. Then on their return, they might catch the architects responsible for putting up new banks like Georgian cinemas. Banks that look like Georgian cinemas is just how he's phrased it, if you can imagine that, and hang them in iron cage, which they will find ready in their castle dungeon. A cage obviously designed to hold a bank architect. It is, of course, rather difficult to forecast the future of a city which pays hundreds of pounds for the work of a Norwich artist, yet allows water to drip on his grave in a Norwich church. I refer to John Crome, who is buried in St. George at Colgate. I've never heard of John Crome, but maybe somebody else has. Stranger's Hall, which stands in a small courtyard in a busy street, is one of the most beautiful small medieval houses you will see in England. Norwich is packed with these unexpected places. The cathedral is full of splendid Norman work, notably the nave. I can imagine that this is the least known cathedral in England. The clerestory, set back within a wall passage, has Norman lights. The aisles are also Norman. There is a curious opening in the roof through which the monks used to let down a swinging censer. Norwich Cathedral has not the situation nor the west front of Lincoln, but to me it was vastly more interesting than the more famous church. In a little pot of ground outside, in a little plot of ground outside, the cathedral rises a white cross. To the pure and holy memory of Edith Cavell, who gave her life for England on October the 12th, 1915. Whoever Edith Cavell is. I'm just going to pause there because I'm really struggling today I'm not struggling to misread the words. How are we doing? I received an unsolicited package from Amazon today. Oh, that's always nice. Think of the fat lady singing. Okay, I will. Brunhild is a powerful female figure from Germanic heroic legend. Did I mention a Brun? Oh, is that somebody I meant? I can't remember now. Clint Brook, good afternoon from the Stiper Stones. Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Sorry, I can't read a thing today. Audrey says, I saw a proper old-fashioned tramp the other day marching along wearing many coats and all his possessions on his back. I like the country too, says Todd. Clint says, have you watched Coastal Path on BBC Two? I don't have a television, so the answer is no, I haven't watched it. Isn't the Norwich football team called the Canaries? It may well be. There we are. Famous nurse. John Crome, landscape artist. Thank you, Edward. Oh. Sorry, I'm struggling with my eye as well, which is leaking. Every Saturday morning, the city of Norwich becomes Norfolk. The whole county pours into town. The narrow streets fill. The squire and his good-looking daughters, the friar and his buxom wife, scores of strong-limbed morthers, drovers chewing straws and plodding along with their eyes on the back views of cows. The cattle market, which Cobbett said was the best and most attractive market in England, fills pen by pen with sheep and oxen and pigs. I bet it doesn't now. Flocks of sheep move in dust. The air is full of lurring and bleating and horse cries. Horse as in horse cries. And the crack of sticks and the ring of hobnailed boots on the cobbles. Cheap jacks who have tramped the roads open ancient Gladstone bags and display strange goods to a ring of solid Norfolk faces. Faces not dull or simple, but simply padlocked with caution and the determination not to be done. It must be hard work to sell things in Norwich Market. This solid silver cigarette case was left in the train. I'm telling you the truth. Surprising what people leave in the trains, isn't it? It belonged to a lord. Look, that's what they call his monogram. Lord Blank. Now, come on. Who says? But no one is saying anything. It isn't done in but no one is saying, I can't tell when is this somebody else talking? No. But no one is saying anything. It isn't done in Norfolk. You let the other fellow say it all first. No idea what that was about. A man drives up in a mysterious motor van. The sides fall down to reveal a little stage set with 2 chairs and a table, on which is an electric battery. The walls are plastered with tributes to an electric current rheumatism cure, and rather inconsequent X-ray photographs. Slowly, timidly, an old country woman mounts the platform and holds the terminals, white-lipped. Her relatives stand below, waiting to see her killed or cured. The current is switched on. Her eyes pop out of her head. She steps down. "Do you feel better, Ma?" "I believe I do." Suddenly she was American. "I believe I do." In the public bars of Norfolk, farmers split farthings all day. Is there such acute bargaining anywhere else in England? A pig and fourpence will keep two Norfolk farmers busy all day long. Here's a picture of Norwich. Somewhere in Norwich, anyway. Pool's Ferry, that is. Pool's Ferry. "A cigar," said a fine red farmer who came into a shop in which I happened to be buying tobacco. "And don't you give me none of your muck neither, bro." Bro, beau, bore. No one goes word-mincing in Norfolk. "Ninepence," said the tobacconist, showing him some. "Sevenpence," said the farmer. "No, ninepence is the price." "Well, you can keep 'em." "Eightpence," said the tobacconist. "Will you take it?" "Ah, bore, that I'll do, though it ain't worth it." When he had gone, the tobacconist said it was only an 8-penny cigar, but it would never do to admit it. In moonlight, Norwich, from the castle wall, lies with shining roofs, the green light rippling the length of the thin spire of the cathedral and falling into the dark, narrow streets. A drover behind his sheep crosses the empty market square in a pool of lamplight, and it seems that centuries have slipped back, that the Norwich looms are clacking once again along the deserted riverside and along... Oh, for God's sake. It seems that the centuries have slipped back, that the Norwich looms are clacking once again, that along the deserted riverside are the ghosts of the Flemish masts. And I'm really sorry, I am just struggling too much. Dear, oh dear. Didn't realise there were pictures in the book. Well, there were, and every time I looked at the pictures, to the chapters that we were talking about, they weren't relevant. Here is another one. This is Hadrian's Wall, and just look at this, and lovely Julia, look at this particularly, because I am convinced that that view there is identical to the view that Julia and I had when we were visiting Sycamore Gap, and we had to walk along that wall and up that hill and over and down, and I think that is the same view, the same place. And and I think that's the same view, and actually I'm just going to check. Let's just see this, because my reading is crap, and I apologise for that. I don't know why. I'm tired today. I sort of had a funny day, but I'm just going to see if that is true. Sycamore Gap. Just going to turn that off because we don't want any... hang on, bear with me, because I'm looking to see if there is the view. I did a video with the lovely Julia when we went up there, and I'm convinced there's a shot that looks that way. So, oh, I turned the bloody camera around. Look at that. Bear with me, viewers. Yeah, never mind all that. I want to see the view the other way. Here we go. See, now it's not quite. You see that hill there? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it is a bit different. You can see how the wall is going. There is a lot of shadow, but the wall goes along there. This is a different camera and is in a different place, so it may look slightly different. But now if I come back to me, I would if I could find the mouse. There we go. And we look at that again. You see that's very, very similar. It might be slightly different. But there's the hills in the background are the same. And beyond that is Sycamore Gap. And it wouldn't be surprised because just where the camera is being taken, behind that is the car park. Great if it's the same view. Yeah, the car park does look like the spot we started from, says the lovely Julie. I mean, there could be hundreds of those types of spots, but I just thought I'd give my eyes a break, really. But yes, going back to the photos, there are photos in here. But every time we were reading and then a photo popped up, I did look, but it was not relevant to the places that we were reading, really. So that's why I haven't bothered to show you them. Right, I'll try and read. I'll carry on reading, but I'll try. I'm just sorry if I'm stumbling today. So here we go. Beyond Cromer, the clay next to the sea. Now, clay next to the sea, we worked out, did we not work out the clay next to the sea was the story of the Norfolk farm that he called, what did he call it? He called it, what did he call it? It was something like wreck or something, wasn't it? Or croak or somewhere. He went to this funny little thing, croak next to the sea. And we thought, we worked out that's what he meant in the book that we abandoned in the end because it was just too awful to read. Anyway, beyond Cromer, from clay next the sea, which Norfolk men pronounce Cly, the level salt marshes run for miles towards a thin ridge of yellow sand, beyond which is the ocean. The tide goes out for miles and returns at a canter. It is desolate. The wind whispers, the seabirds cry. No men but naturalists disturb the solitude of the salt marshes. Wells next to the sea is in North Norfolk, yes. But I don't think this was Wells. Was it Wells next to the sea that he was going? I can't remember the name of the place anyway. The wind blows, because he did. I thought he made up the name of a thing. We worked out he'd made up the name of the town where not Montebank or whatever his name was, Blancmange man. I can't remember the name of the. Anyway, doesn't matter. The wind blows through miles of sea lavender, great lakes of pink and purple, and the gold clouds pile up over the edge of the sea and roll landward like great galleons. The light falling on this flat land squarely intensifies colour so that you cry out at sudden glories in the painful knowledge that nothing but watercolour can tell the story truly. The sea marshes are full of life. A grey-blue heron lifts noiselessly above the green reeds and sails away with a slow beat of great wings, his long legs held stiff behind him. He settles. With keen eyes you can see his head lift to the level of the reeds, watching you. White gulls sit in rows on the shells of wrecked fishing boats. There is a sudden flurry of white and a great screaming. Up they go into the air, orange feet tucked into soft white undersides, wheeling, turning, poised in the air, motionless. Then down, down like white darts with a sudden outflinging of orange feet. For the tide is coming in, rushing in, swirling up in the creeks and the twisty channels. 1 minute the oozy banks are dry, the next they are alive with a brown snake of water that writhes and bubbles, lapping up the bright fringe of samphire at the edges. And it is lonely, with the water lapping and the birds crying and the wind pressing the blue thrift backwards from the sea, for this is a strange no-man's land. It is not land and it's not water, but a queer, beautiful region, half land, half water, and it seems to you that the sea fights for it daily and the grass defends it. When you turn your back to the salt marshes, you see, far away, flat meadows and green land and villages, clear etched, and grey flint church towers rising above the trees. To the left and to the right, a thin line of woodland is the colour of the bloom on the purple grape. All along the coast at the edge of the great salt marshes are curious little villages which were once seaports. Huge flint churches in desolate meadows tell you that yesterday the coast was alive with men and commerce. There is Blakeney, whose church has an extra tower, once a lighthouse, now eloquently ruined. There is Clay, there is Salthouse, there is Weybourne, in whose ancient bay the wild fowl nest. There is Wells next to the sea, all old seaports, which the sea has deserted. In a cosy vale is the village of Stiffkey. It's a curious little village, noted for its cockle women. When I went down to the long sea marsh, I crossed rotting timbers flung across the creeks, and I went on for miles through mud and marsh till I came at length to the distant ridge of sand which has wrecked more ships than the Needles, and the incredible expanse of shore. Dotted about this gold plain were bent black figures raking up the famous Stew-key blues, as the cockles are called. One cockle gatherer came to me bent beneath the weight of an enormous sack. It was impossible to tell whether this strange figure was that of man or woman. She was wearing a black divided skirt, thick worsted stockings, wet through with salt water, clung to her legs. The thick worsted stockings, wet through with salt water, clung to her legs. She wore a black shawl over her shoulders and a sou'wester that buttoned like a Kate Greenaway bonnet beneath her chin. When I stopped her, she lifted her face, and I saw that she was an ancient dame of at least 70. Her toothless little mouth was prized primly in below a smooth apple face etched with 1,000,000 fine lines, and her eyes were blue and childish. Like many people in this part of England, she was frightened of questions. I asked her if she was strong enough to do such hard work, and she said that she'd been doing it since she was a young woman. A few years ago, someone wrote up Stiffkey and its cockle women in a cruel light. It was alleged that intermarriage had so affected the inhabitants that the men did no work while the women slaved to keep things going. "That's a pack of nonsense," said the ancient cockle gatherer. "Our men work on the land, and we women have long before living memory gone down to the sea to get the cockles. I started when I was married, and I wanted extra money to bring up the children, and that's why most of us do it." She turned towards the sea and said, "Those are the last cockle gatherers you'll see in Stiffkey. Girls today want to be ladies. They don't like them to get themselves up in such ugly clothes and go down to the sea as their mothers and grandmothers, and yes, their great-grandmothers did. And they don't like hard work either. Oh, yes, we're the last of the cockle women, we old ones. There'll be gangs of Chinese cockle diggers who'll come here, no doubt, and probably get washed away by the sea and die in a horrible agonising death at the hands of gang leaders. I don't know that was there, was it? Was that in Norfolk where those Chinese were made to go out and did the cockle thing and then they were drowned because of the sea? Or was that further up north? A look of absolute terror came into the face of this old woman when I asked her if I might take a photograph of her. She put up her hands to her eyes, as I have seen the Arabs do when faced by a camera. "No, no," she said, and looked round for cover. I soothed her with great difficulty. It was not modesty, I think, or the thought of being photographed in such queer garments. Here and there in remote parts of England there still exists a curious belief that to be photographed brings bad luck. There are few stranger sights in England than the return of these cockle women before the galloping tide. Slowly, heavily, they come with dripping sacks of stewky blues on their backs. Most of them are old women who belong to a tougher generation. Some are middle-aged, and now and then a girl comes down for fun to see how her mother earned extra money to bring her up. The salt spray drenches the short skirts, and the wind lashes their bare legs as they come plodding in over the salt marshes. This is a curious part of the world, a region barely touched by tourists, a region rich in history and packed full of atmosphere. You can stand on the salt marshes towards the end of the day, with the sun mellow over the windy fields of sea lavender, and it takes little to imagine the Viking ships beaching on a distant strand, the big, red-bearded men wading to the shore, dragging their great double-bladed swords through the purple marshes, shading their eyes to the distant land. There is a melancholy over the sea marshes, quite impossible to describe. You feel that it is good to be alone here, good to wander over the featureless land, listening to the shrill crying of the birds and to the sound of the wind in the grass. So that's where we will leave it at 10:02. I've got to ring up the estate agent and find out what the hell is going on. Sorry about my poor reading today. It was Morecambe Bay, was it? Oh, yes, that's right, Morecambe Bay. Similar sort of thing, though. Stiff key cockle women, there we go. If you need a stiff key cockle woman, I know where to get them. Jeff Kellison says, I think it's amazing considering the small area that Great Britain is, that there are so many distinct accents. Yes, and if only I made them more distinct, that would be useful, wouldn't it? Enjoying English history country walks. Keep up the good work, says Trebor. Sorry, I can't quite read your... Hullisman, is it? All the best from Australia. My pleasure, thank you very much. Wells next to the sea, yeah, we said that. Must be the same. It must be same, just eroded somewhat. Oh yes, that's true. Could eroded. Infinite Koala Army. Sorry, I'm late. No problem. We're just finishing now, I'm afraid. Wonder if he made a success of the farm in the end, says Audrey Forbes Hamilton. Oh, about Henry Williamson. Yeah, good question. I don't know. Never got to the end, unfortunately, because the writing was atrocious. Compared to the writing of HV Morton, it was dreadful work. But his is beautifully written, sometimes a bit hard for me to read. It is quite small print, but I'm not going to give myself excuses. Anyway, there we go. Thank you so much. Take care, one and all. There'll be a Vogue show later on, hopefully full of fun and games. And no more reading over the weekend, but back on Monday. So there we go. See you on the Vogue show. So that's all good. And have a good weekend, whatever you're doing, if I don't catch up with you. Yeah. So now, how do I turn this off again? I've lost since I put Sycamore Gap on there. I've lost where I am. Righty-ho. Take care, one and all. Have a nice weekend. Thanks so much. All the best, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.